Gosh, that's quite a long walk. Got here in the end. Thank you very much for the invitation to address you today. I would also like to take the opportunity before I begin to express thanks on behalf of all the guests to Andrea, the team and the wider delegates for your hospitality, your solidarity and your personal kindness. It has been greatly appreciated. Andrea has asked me to update you on our workload campaign, and it's clear from your AGM so far that this is also a central issue for you. One of your delegates yesterday referenced Balamory to illustrate your issues around support for teachers on the islands, and it put me in mind of a reference that illustrates our battles, which is a never-ending story. I'll begin with a bit of context which impacts on our never-ending story. Firstly, in Northern Ireland, or the north of Ireland, because like you, we strive for inclusivity, we have 5 recognised teaching unions representing the teaching workforce across all sectors: nursery, primary, post-primary and special. The 5 unions work together under what is known as the NITC, the Northern Ireland Teachers' Council, which forms one side of our negotiating machinery. The other side is made up of the wide range of employers and employer bodies which we have dealing with our wide range of school types: controlled, maintained, integrated, voluntary grammar and Irish medium. Representatives from those bodies are on management side, and unlike the situation in Scotland, the Department of Education sits with them on that side of the table. Funding is also particularly tight. We're a post-conflict society. Research shows that the block grant we receive from Westminster funds us at a level well below need. We, like you, have suffered many years of austerity and public sector pay freezes, and so, like you, we continue to seek proper pay restoration. And on top of all that, we have an extremely unstable government, which, if history is anything to go by, might have collapsed again by the time I get home. And with that background, we set out to make progress on workload. It all began in earnest in 2020. Our pay at that time was the lowest across the islands, but despite that, the huge issue was workload and the fact that the seeking of information, the decrease in effectiveness of other services, the societal changes all landed in schools. But workload as an issue for dispute has many problems. Difficulties are different within different sectors. Differences in what is perceived as workload also varies within schools and between year groups. The term workload is a catch-all phrase which represents content which is difficult to define. Also, when teachers try to define workload, they don't see anything which is beneficial to the children as workload. So the challenge is twofold. What is not necessary and what which is necessary can be pared back and streamlined to make it manageable and meaningful. And then, once we work out what it is, not to do it. We therefore moved forward on the basis that the dispute was on pay, with commitments to reduce workload built into the agreement. We had been on a sustained period of industrial action, and that action had included non-participation with the ETI, and that's our inspectorate body. The toxic nature of our inspection process at that time had actually been directly responsible, firstly, for much of the pointless and needless paperwork that teachers and school leaders had been required to carry out, and secondly, for the erosion of teachers' professional confidence, an erosion that is a direct result of excessive scrutiny and accountability. Stormont, surprise, surprise, was actually down at that time, from 2017 to 2020. We hadn't a government, and then they came back just in time for COVID. Despite having no government, the dispute regarding pay and workload for teachers had been under negotiation since February 2017, but obviously the Department of Finance was unable to deliver the funding during that time, and there was no minister to seek agreement from. The re-establishment of the Stormont Executive meant that a deal was presented to the Minister for Education when he took up office. Just prior to the onslaught of the COVID-19 crisis, the Education Minister, Peter Weir, at that time, made a public commitment in March 2020 that he would prioritise the resolution of the current dispute, and such was stated in the New Decade, New Approach document from the Northern Ireland Executive. A meeting was called of the Teachers Negotiating Committee in April 2020, and an offer to settle the dispute was made. Although this was in line with the expected time frame prior to the crisis, it was an unexpected development in the circumstances, but a welcomed one. In April 2020, management side and the NITC formally ratified the agreement, which included a pay offer, urgent measures to be progressed in terms of workload, and a suite of workforce reviews. Of the measures to be progressed urgently, we received directed time budgets and 10% PPA time. And if I could just explain, our teachers' contract is called the Jordanstown Agreement. It's been in place since 1987. Teachers, it says in the contract, were required to work a maximum of 1265 hours per year. That is a number that is ingrained in all of our brains, over no more than 195 days, excluding time spent on lesson preparation outside school. And that was where the difficulty came from, because what was happening was the idea was the work that you had to do should have been in the 1265 hours and reflected in what was called a directed time budget at the beginning of every year. But what was happening was the schools were filling up the 1265 hours, leaving all of the preparation time for after school, and then citing the part of the Jordanstown Agreement that says that's not included. So it was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We then got there at that time 10% PPA time, 10% of the 1265, which allowed us for planning, preparation and assessment, and it started to create a space within the working time, but we still have that clause at the other end. What we also got were workforce reviews. We got reviews in 9 key areas. They were designed to address teacher concerns about workload and accountability and improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the education system. That was the strapline. The Workforce Review Project was established in early 2021, following a funding commitment from the Minister of Education of up to 1.2 million over 2 years to progress the 9 reviews. In the space of 18 months and over 200 meetings, we produced hundreds of recommendations, but few were enacted. Statutory assessment was reviewed, and it's still under review to this day, and the only reason it's being reviewed was because it was so bad that even management side had to say it was so bad, so they gave it to us as a win, but actually it wasn't fit for purpose. We got a bit more recognition of health and well-being. Consultation arrangements moved a little. Where the big change was with the Education and Training Inspectorate, the ETI. We had a huge change with there. We had a new chief inspector. The entire regime has changed. They've pared the paperwork back. They focus on professional dialogue, and that has been a huge change. But our teachers are still afraid of the ETI coming in, and the culture has taken an awful long time to change. So a lot of them are still doing paperwork that's not necessary for fear that they will come in, and it's just taken us time to get it embedded. But despite all of that, the teachers were feeling very little difference in the classroom, and we took learning points from that. Funding was provided to carry out the reviews and provide support, but there was no plan for funding the change that would come out of those reviews. And there was no firm implementation plan to manage those outworkings. And actually at that time, when we were trying to push that forward, there was an inadvertent comment, I'm being kind, from management side, who said that one of the representatives in management side said, yes, we agreed to do the reviews, we didn't agree to deliver the reviews. And fair enough, I suppose we should have looked at that more closely. Anyway, in the midst of this, we then lodged a pay claim for 21-22, An offer was made and rejected. There was no further pay offer on the table for teachers with regard to 21-22 when the Assembly collapsed again in March 22. We now had no pay, no tangible workload gains, and no minister to do anything. Tensions were running high, teachers were stressed from the COVID period, and the outlook was bleak, to say the least. So we took matters into our own hands. If they weren't going to deliver on workload and there was no pay in its way either, we would just protest. So we all across the 5 unions sought mandates from our individual unions to pursue a course of action short of strike, to escalate over 3 phases with strike action as a further option. All unions balloted in September 22, got a mandate for both ASOS and strike, and this actually, and I'm very pleased to say, was an unprecedented result for my members in UTU because it was the first time they had ever voted in favour of strike action, so it was absolutely brilliant, and it indicated to me the strength of feeling of my members. So the phases of ASOS were enacted in October, November 22, January 23, and then we had a half day of strike action. Stormont was still down, and finally the teaching unions joined with the other public sector unions who were in the same boat. There were no ministers, there was no assembly, there was no pay, and we took unprecedented strike action across many sectors in January 2024, and it had an effect, because Stormont returned in February 2024. And we got a new minister, Paul Given, and he was straight out of the blocks. At a meeting of the Teachers Negotiating Committee in April 24, the Northern Ireland Teachers Council formally accepted management side's offer for teachers' pay for 21-22, 22-23 and 23-24. And it was 3 years since we'd had anything. The pay settlement, and this gives you an idea of where it's sitting, the pay settlement included a rise in the starting salary for teachers in Northern Ireland to 30,000. That was done as a recruitment and retention exercise because we are hemorrhaging, continue to hemorrhage, our newly recently qualified teachers. At that time, our newly qualified teachers were earning just in excess of 24,000, which in the bigger picture, and you look across the islands, it's shockingly bad. And we actually got to the situation where when we were doing recruitment at the colleges, the young student teachers were telling us, actually, I'm not going to teach here, I'm going to teach in the Republic. I'm going to go to Scotland, I'm going to go, or I'm going to go to Dubai or Australia or whatever. And we hadn't enough to keep them there. We still don't with the workload, but we went to the 30,000. And the settlement also included a reviewed workload agreement. So what we were promised was the following: a framework to address the recommendations contained in the 8 completed workforce reviews, like from 4 years earlier, will be agreed by the 31st of May 24. This framework will include, and this was the progress, a timetable for the implementation of those areas which can be progressed both immediately and over a short to medium term. This will include the implementation of the revised TNC workload agreement from the 1st of August 2024 and the measures to address school leader workload which can be progressed. So off we went again. Between April and June, very little progress was made. In June 2024, NITC put a pay claim to management side for 24-25. The offer was derisory, little progress still had been made on workload. November 24, we balloted again, and we again got the mandate. Management side at that stage requested a 4-week delay before we went out, which was granted. But then they did a subsequent further offer, and it was made in January, and the members wouldn't accept that either, and ASOS commenced. In the intervening period, and it was painful, let me tell you, the constituent unions of NITC undertook intensive engagement with members, and the message was clearly received that the working conditions in terms of workload were key to moving the profession forward. A message received by us, received by the system, but received by the Minister. The final 24-25 pay settlement therefore included an independent review of workload, resulting in 27 recommendations which have the potential to significantly reduce the current pressures on teachers and school leaders across the system. UTU and our NITC colleagues fully appreciated the work of and engagement with the panel, and particularly in this setting would seek to thank Laurie Flanagan, who agreed to be the employee representative. And can I just say, we played a blinder getting him involved. And it is undoubtedly his input as a teacher trade union leader, as a renowned educationalist, and most importantly, as a practitioner, which brought us to this point. He put in a lot of work for us. He did that in the interests of unity and solidarity, and he drove that panel forward. There were 3 on the panel. The employers represented put forward a representative from their side, and then we had an independent chair. But I think Laurie was chair, decision maker, the whole lot. Anyway, yeah. Following the failure to deliver on the views in 2020, the 24-25 pay settlement had also identified 26 heads of agreement, key changes, easily deliverable changes, which defined key factors to reduce workload and which were time-bound in respect of delivery. So the independent panel also took control of those. And in addition to developing its own report, it was tasked with overseeing this work and ensuring timelines were met. And it was very intensive engagement, because they brought us in to make sure that management side were doing their bit when it came to those, as well as doing their own work. So NITC and management side have worked together over the past year to bring the 26 to fruition. We've got all but 3 ready for delivery, and even those 3 are nearly there. But they're still with us. They're not with the teachers. The teachers are still not seeing the difference, but they're ready now for delivery, and we now must try to embed them into the system. So the panel built on this work. Its recommendations cover a number of key areas, including workload associated with Transform Ed, which is our minister's efforts to change everything in the entire education system in the next 6 months. It feels like it's just going hammer and tongs, and it's obviously creating a lot of workload. Tracking and assessment, vexatious parental complaints, and pupil behaviour. So the panel brought those things onto the table to try to move us forward in the recommendations with dealing with a lot of that. Furthermore, the panel took a sensible approach, common sense, lower cost recommendations which could not be rejected out of hand. Very deliverable, and there we thought things were looking up. And by the way, that report is available on the Department of Education Northern Ireland website. It's available on our union websites, and you can have a look and see what Laurie's team, it really was Laurie's team, was really Laurie, came up with. Following the publication of the report, the Minister communicated his intentions regarding implementation to teachers and school leaders. And whilst this was welcomed, it was short on detail with regard to timeframes. The subsequent action plan then raised concerns regarding the interpretation of some of the recommendations. One example was in relation to the 35/40 hours issue, which was Laurie's attempt, the panel's attempt, to bring that additional workload down. And what the panel said was 35 hours a week can be considered reasonable, 40 hours is unreasonable, and the interpretation was 35 to 40 hours a week is reasonable. So, you know, those kinds of things. So different unions had different red lines, so to speak. We got stuck on agreement, and as a consequence, and in solidarity, all unions informed the employers of their intention to ballot this week. We informed them this week. The ballot's open next Wednesday. But there is a simple solution. Much of the preparatory work has been done to bring many issues to the point of being ready to deliver, but the DE need to get behind it and just do it. The Minister also needs to read the room. The commitments to deliver on workload, including at the ISTP, do not sit well with the breakneck speed at which he's attempting, as I said earlier, to reform everything from curriculum to assessment to SEN, all at the same time. His purported trust and respect for the profession also appear to be somewhat contradicted by the fact that he has attempted this week to bring in legislation to prevent us from any further non-engagement with ETI activity, and he seems to have forgotten that we actually had an agreement to that effect already drafted. However, it is what it is. So we're waiting now to see if this latest ballot will move us forward at all. The ballot will be open all summer, so management has the opportunity to engage with us, with an independent arbitrator if necessary, and just deliver the change. And it is imperative that they do. Trust is low, confidence is low, and we're running on fumes. The profession must be given evidence to believe that change is coming, work-life balance is coming, and that not only are they being heard, but that the system is doing something about it. But it's a cautionary tale. ETI created a culture which has proven difficult to change. ASOS provided the permission to stop doing things, many of which teachers shouldn't have been doing anyway. We must change the mindset. After ASOS, they went back and did some of the things that they didn't need to be doing because the ASOS gave them the permission, and we have to work at moving beyond that mindset. Otherwise, the work will have been in vain. So our teachers and school leaders, they must reclaim their professionalism, their professional confidence, and their sense of self-worth. As I said previously, the ASOS gave us the permission and space to focus, to set on their own priorities, to focus on what they know to be in the interests of the teaching and learning of the children in their care, but they must be empowered to do just that, whether they are on action or not. And the Minister must understand that giving teachers back their self-worth and professional confidence means honouring commitments, delivering on promises, and accepting the fact that teachers know what is best for their pupils, doing what he said he would do. And if he does honour those commitments, deliver on those promises, we must grab the opportunity with both hands. We must be discerning in what we do with our wins. Whether it is your reduction in class contact time, and incidentally, just for a bit of information, we're still on 25 hours for primary and 23.5 for post-primary, so we're looking to you on that. Or whether it's measures that we have on our sites for creating space for teaching, learning and well-being, we must stick to our guns. Pointless or unwieldy paperwork is still pointless and unwieldy paperwork, whether we have more time to do it or not. We must reclaim our professionalism, believe that we are the educational experts in our own classrooms and schools, and learn to say no. Listening to the inspirational speeches from both your President and your General Secretary, I know that you're in the same place as us, that promises must be kept, that commitments must be delivered, that professional confidence must be restored. We at home often look towards Scotland and learn from your achievements and successes. It gives us a basis on which to fight. If we get this over the line, maybe we can return the favour this time. Thanks and solidarity.